You know that feeling when you're standing in the kitchen aisle, eyeing a commercial-grade blender and wondering if it's really worth the price tag? I've been there, scrolling through endless specs, trying to picture how the machine would actually fit into my daily routine, and worrying that I might end up with a piece of equipment that sits idle while the rent keeps piling up. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video, I'm going to walk through the Waring CB15BU commercial food blender the way I would if a friend asked me whether it's the right fit for their small batch operation before they hand over their hard-earned cash. First off, let's talk about the kind of environment this blender was built for. Waring's name is synonymous with restaurant-grade durability, and the CB15BU follows that lineage. It's a 120-volt unit with 3 speed settings plus a pulse function, which on paper sounds straightforward. The real question is how those controls translate into everyday tasks like crushing ice for frozen drinks, pureeing soups for a busy lunch line, or emulsifying sauces for a catering prep table. If you're running a coffee shop that needs a steady stream of fraps, a food truck that wants to keep a batch of salsa ready all day, or a small bakery that mixes batter on the fly, this blender can slot into that workflow without forcing you to juggle a handful of smaller appliances. One of the first practical things I noticed when testing the CB15BU was the container size and shape. The jar is a classic, tall, tapered design that accommodates a decent volume big enough for a 2-liter batch, but still compact enough to sit under a standard 48-inch countertop. The shape helps the blades create a vortex that pulls ingredients down, which means you spend less time stopping the machine to scrape the sides. In a real-world scenario, that translates to smoother purees for soups and sauces with fewer interruptions. If you're making a large pot of butternut squash bisque for a brunch service, you can throw the cooked veggies, broth, and spices in, hit medium speed, and walk away for a few minutes while the blender does the heavy lifting. The 3-speed dial is intuitive. Low speed works well for gentle stirring when you're blending delicate ingredients like fresh herbs into a pesto without bruising the leaves. Mid-speed is your all-purpose setting. It's perfect for crushing ice for a frozen margarita or blending fruit for a smoothie. High speed, paired with the pulse function, is where the unit really shines for tougher jobs. I tried a batch of frozen berries with a splash of almond milk, and the pulse gave me control over texture, letting me stop right before the mixture turned into a puree that was too thick for a sip-and-go cup. The ability to fine-tune texture on the fly is a subtle but valuable feature for anyone who needs to serve consistent products all day. Now, no equipment is without its trade-offs, and the CB15BU is no exception. Because it's a commercial model, the motor is built for longevity rather than flash speed. That means it won't spin as wildly fast as some high-end residential blenders that boast 500+ watts. In practice, this shows up when you try to pulverize frozen fruit straight from the freezer. You'll need to let the fruit thaw slightly or add a little liquid, otherwise the motor will stall and the blades won't cut through cleanly. For a bar that serves frozen drinks every hour, that's a small inconvenience you can work around. But if you need a blender that can pulverize rock-hard ice in seconds without any prep, you might be better off looking at a higher model. Noise is another realistic consideration. Commercial blenders are notorious for being loud, and the CB15BU is no different. When it's running at high speed, the motor hums loudly enough that you'll want to keep the door closed if you're in an open-concept kitchen or a small coffee shop with seating. That's not a deal-breaker for most professional settings. But if you're planning to use the blender in a home kitchen that doubles as a workspace, the sound level could be a surprise. Let's talk about durability, because that's often the biggest factor in deciding whether a commercial blender is worth the investment. The CB15BU comes with a stainless steel blade assembly that feels robust. During my testing, I tossed in a handful of raw carrots, a chunk of frozen mango, and even a few ice cubes, and the blades held up without dulling. The jar itself is made from a thick, BPA-free plastic that resists cracking under impact. In a high-volume environment where you're constantly loading and unloading, that kind of resilience can save you from costly replacements. However, the jar does not have a sealing lid that doubles as a pour spout. You have to remove the lid to pour, which adds an extra step when you're trying to keep the line moving. For a setup where you're making one large batch and then transferring it to a serving container, it's fine, but if you need to,